thought we'd try something different today and just talk about some magic cards, if that seems interesting. What I'd like to do is go through the original Magic set, Alpha, we call it now. Back then, it was just called Magic the Gathering. And just talk about some magic cards. So, let's do that. I'm propping up my little thing here. Anyways, so can zoom in a little bit here. I'm not really interested in prices and stuff like that. Okay, so animate wall. We're starting with a goofy one. I love the art. I love the wall that's just like, I'm a wall. I'm animated. I'm not happy about it. It's a bad card, but it's funny. So, thumbs up. Armageddon. My phone fell down. Armageddon. I think right here at the beginning of Magic, you can see this willingness to just be like, here's an iconic concept, Armageddon. All lands are destroyed. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Not fun to play against. All land destruction stuff pretty much goes out of the game for that reason because it's just not fun. But yeah, cool. Balance. Speaking of land destruction, this is famously an unbalanced card. Basically, whoever's ahead has to sacrifice a whole bunch of crap until they're even with the person who's the most behind. Which one of the tricks of game design is to have ways for people to catch up, but also to not make it feel that bad when you're like, I put in all that work and I just got wiped out because now I'm brought down. Yeah. Anyways, it looks cool. I don't know why this knight has such pretty feathers on his helmet, but you do you. Benelish Hero. So the banding ability was supposed to be a big deal. Um, let me read this. This is the modernized, cleaned up version of the text of banding. Any creatures with banding and up to one without can attack in a band. Bands are blocked as a group. If any creatures with banding you control are blocking or being blocked by a creature, you divide that creature's combat damage, not its controller, among any of the creatures it's being blocked by or is blocking. What? So yeah, that didn't catch on. Also, we're going to see Douglas Schuler, whose name we're looking at Scryfall here, and I like how they've noted that his name is misprinted on misspelled on all of Alpha. He opts as an art. This is the artist. He opts to have plain backgrounds, like just flat backgrounds, because reduced down to the size of a card, no one's going to be able to see that stuff. Which mostly I think does not work out, but in some cases it's pretty iconic. In this case, it's kind of just, yeah, she's ready to join your band of very confused warriors. But you'd probably rather play a Savannah land that's just bigger rather than having this weird plays well with others things. Okay, so black ward, and we're going to see blue ward in a second as well. The wards, one of the biggest, it's easy to go back and nitpick the design of the first Magic the Gathering set because no one had done anything like this before. One of the things that really stands out is like why is the color white specifically has so much redundancy just because it wants to give everything protection from every color. It wants to have circles of protection to defend itself against every, but it has to specify. And so many cards are used up. There's black ward, blue ward, red ward, green ward. It's like just not that interesting. So yeah, that's the thing. I like this. I like this illustration. Like very primal. Like I'm warding against the scary stuff. Blaze of Glory. There's some combat manipulation stuff in alpha that they kind of abandon because it's not like the rules are. It takes a while for them to really nail down the rules, and this one is like, look at all this text. It's got an example in it. It's basically you can force something to in combat to block a specific thing, but it's like ends up being so complicated and very cartoony, sort of like children's book art, which is not a bad thing, but it's something they move away from, of course, as it goes on. Blessing. This one, the art on this has always been like weirdly, I don't know. It's like really specific, but also really vague. Like what? I guess they're being blessed by this dude who's swinging around his censer. It looks like he's gonna whack the guy in the head though. And they've wandered out of their village or church or whatever. I don't know. It's a little weird. Blessing lets you pay white mana to make something bigger, which was kind of notable early on. Early on, just a lot of the possibilities hadn't been explored yet. So this was a way that you could use a lot of white mana to make a creature really large for whatever that was worth. Blue ward. I like the art on this one. It's Dan Fraser does a lot of these more abstract, like materials based art in alpha, and I like this one. Blue ward. It's another of these ward cards that are kind of boring. Castle. There's overall, I would say there's too many ways to be defensive in this first set. Like Magic strategy kind of already gives you a lot of flexibility when you're on defense. So I feel like it's better for the game to be natural, a little more leaning on the offensive. So yeah, this is an example of that, and it's a picture of a castle. Circle of Protection, blue. One of the funny things about alpha is they accidentally left out Circle of Protection black. So it's this weird absence. Like, why is there no Circle of Protection black? Just a mistake. But again, there's 5 of these cards, and they're all kind of boring. Circle of Protection green. Circle of Protection red. The one that got the most use because it prevents damage, and red likes to do damage. Circle of Protection white. Here's Consecrate Land, which some of these old cards, it's funny because this is complicated. Oh, we've added indestructible as a term to the game. It's just Consecrate Land. In retrospect, we'll just say it makes things indestructible. Yay. Conversion. So there's all of these, what we would call back then, we called them the color hosers. Like, here's a card that if you're playing white and your opponent's playing red, this just screws them over. There was a bunch of stuff like this, and I feel like it takes them a while to realize that it's just not that fun. Crusade. This card does not meet Magic community standards. I'm going to talk about it, so I'm going to view this. I don't think this is there's worse examples than Crusade. It's just some generic, vaguely Christian question mark knights, and they're setting a fire. And this, what I want to say is, this is the kind of thing that we used to have in fantasy art all of the time, and without really thinking about it, do we want to portray a crusade as being a thing that my little nerd game dudes are gonna do? Is this a good idea? Anyways, it's just I feel like this is a conversation that maybe Magic helps to start. Certainly the Lord of the Rings movies get a lot of people thinking about, isn't all this stuff about races, the race of man and the elves and the dwarves and the goblins and all these things? Isn't this all a little bit suspect? Should we maybe think about this a little? Anyways, that's more than Crusade really is worth talking about. Death Ward regenerates a creature. there's too many conditional, like you have to play them at the right time. Defensive cards as well that are not that interesting. Yeah, so that's one of those. Disenchant, interesting. Disenchant later gets moved to green. Green gets naturalized in Onslaught block, which is like 4 or 5 years later. I don't remember. Um, yeah, so this card basically moves to green, and for a while, white doesn't get to do this like as efficiently as that to have to just be like 2 mana enchantment artifact whatever destroy it. But it eventually kind of comes back around, and now sometimes white does get disenchant. So it's just a thing that kind of fluctuates, I guess. Farmstead. Um, it seems like there's a lot of attempts to make enchant land like a thing that makes sense in every color, and in this case, it's just you can pay some mana and you can gain some life, and you can. It's real slow and real expensive for what it does. Green Ward. I always kind of thought it was interesting how the ward looks like it's like some kind of single-celled life form or something. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, there's another ward. There's a lot of them. And that's something you see going forward is in Magic's design is figuring out what ideas are worth taking up a card. Here's Guardian Angel. And the next one's Healing Salve, which are both ones where you have to play them in response to damage to prevent the damage, and it's just not worth the effort it takes, especially if you're spending X to prevent that damage. But anyways, Healing Salve, gain 3 life, prevent 3 damage. We'll talk about that later. Holy Armor and Holy Strength. Defense is not that interesting. Holy Strength, we'll see Unholy Strength later. It's kind of funny, in the old sets, they would reserve this idea of +1/+2 is Holy Strength, +2/+1 is Unholy Strength, which has really, somewhere along the line, that just stopped being a useful concept. Island Sanctuary. Now here's one where I think the concept is sold so well that I like this card, even though it's very defensive. Um, you go and hide in your island. You have to decline to draw a card. So it's sort of like I'm stepping away, and now only flying things or island walk can hit me. That makes sense. Karma, another color hoser, doesn't have much to do with karma. Why is the guy getting choked by vines? Is that how karma operates? I don't know. Lance, target creature gains first strike. Here's this is such a simple card. It's interesting to look at. Here's the modern rules where we've added this more kind of top-down categorization. It's an enchantment. It's an aura. It enchants a creature. Whereas on this enchant creature is the type of card. But that doesn't really make sense, right? It doesn't. It should be a kind of enchantment that enchants a creature. That makes more, anyways. The streamlining of the Magic rules is a fascinating thing to watch over the course of 30 years. Here's more banding, except flying also complicates banding. Like, in a lot of cases, banding makes flying not work right. So it's like, why? But here's a Pegasus. Northern Paladin, destroy a black card. More of this color hoser stuff. I kind of like how some of the some of the depictions of these like knight hero type fantasy guys, it just looks like some dude. It feels kind of Monty Python, the Holy Grail. Like it's just some guy wearing some armor. Like, yeah, I'm the Northern Paladin. I don't know. Bring me a shrubbery. Pearled Unicorn. It's a unicorn. Good use of flavor text. They almost entirely have stopped doing creatures that have no rules text, what we refer to as vanilla creatures, which with good reason, it's just kind of boring. Personal incarnation. He is an avatar. Um, some of these old cards, like the phrasing, because the magic rules were so much less nailed down back then, they had to like reinterpret what this means under modern rules. Anyways, it's not that great of a card. Then there's the laces. There's 5 laces. They changed something's color, and it makes sense for Magic to explore that because the colors are the heart of the game. It makes sense to explore changing the colors, punishing you for having certain colors. You know, right here at the beginning of the game to explore that idea, but a lot of it doesn't add up to interesting cards. And that's mostly true of the laces, which just, okay, I can turn something white. Another ward. Yeah. Resurrection. This becomes mostly a black ability. Taking something from your graveyard, putting it into play without paying its costs. Yeah, not much else to say about that. Reverse damage. The art on reverse damage is very weird. It's like, what? I guess she's kind of gloating, like, haha, I reversed your damage. But the art is kind of funky. But this card, I feel like this card deserves to get used more. Because back in the day, there was always the possibility, like you were playing, you were about to win the game, unless they had a reverse damage. And I feel like we could use that energy again, especially in mono white, which is at a disadvantage in modern formats like Commander. Righteousness, blocking creature, gets huge, funny. But again, defense doesn't really need to be encouraged in this game. Samite healer, prevent damage. Damage prevention is just, for one thing, it's this whole complicated area of the rules that basically goes away in 6th edition. And good riddance. There's so much damage prevention stuff. Savannah Lions, 2/1, 1 mana. Early Magic creatures are a lot worse, and the spells tend to be a lot more, maybe not stronger necessarily, but they're things like Armageddon, where it's like you're getting like the full intensity of destroy all lands, like the implications of what that means, which often means a boring game. Like the guardrails are off with the other spells. It feels like Savannah Lions, very good, very simple. It's a cat now, not a lion, because they simplified a lot of the creature types. Here is one of the most famous cards in Alpha, Serra Angel, the control finisher. You would play a white-blue deck. You would just try and shut down everything your opponent does, and then once you've slowed the game to a crawl, play Serra Angel and win the game. She flies, so she's hard to defend against. She has vigilance, which means doesn't cause this creature to tap. So she stops. She keeps your defenses up while chiseling away at your opponent's life. Really cool artwork by Douglas Schuler, and it cements this image of an angel, like a woman warrior angel that is one of Magic's favorite archetypes. I would say like really one of the trademarks of Magic the Gathering is their angels. So yeah, this is an important card. Maybe the best creature card in Alpha. It's arguable, but the most important, I think it's fair to say. And it's one of Douglas Schuler's really good ones where you can see the background is pretty dull, but you've got her wings kind of filling in some of the detail and the clouds and stuff, so it doesn't feel as boring as some of the other ones where someone's just kind of standing in a void. Yeah, Sarah Angel, very important card. Um, a lot of Magic decks early on would be like Sarah Angel, clone the Sarah Angel, doppelganger the Sarah Angel, and just it was the style of the time. Swords to Plowshares, 1 mana, exile target creature. It took a while for them to come up with this word exile instead of target creature is removed from the game, which always felt like a lie. Like the removed from the game zone of the game is still within the game. Anyways, very, very good card. Very simple. Gets rid of something. A lot of Magic cards like Hypnotic Spectre and Urnum Jin famously, it has always been hypothesized that there is a farm somewhere full of Hypnotic Spectres and Urnum Jins. Veteran Bodyguard. I remember this card coming up in the old days, but it always felt like an expensive speed bump. Like, I don't think it was actually that good. Certainly not as good as a Sarah Angel, but it takes all the damage done to you. And there were times like putting regeneration on a veteran bodyguard was pretty irritating. It gave magic. It gave white magic a way to, like another use for all of those wards. You could put blue ward or whatever on the veteran bodyguard, so he would absorb the damage from Mahamuti Jin or whatever. Wall of Swords. That is a really big speed bump. Like here's an example of a card I would play before Veteran Bodyguard. It's cheaper. It flies. It can't attack because it's a wall. The art is cool. I like this creeping thing trying to get through the Wall of Swords. And of course, you can refer to it as the Wall of S words if you're that kind of a nerd. White Knight, who's always, we'll see later, Black Knight. The White Knight seems like he's much more like a man of action. Like he's like, I am gonna hit someone with this sword if my horse gets out of the way somehow. Like, what am I exactly gonna do? I don't know. It looks good. Protection in Black, First Strike. Good stuff. White Ward. Now, famously, they added later, this effect doesn't remove this aura. Giving protection from white does not destroy White Ward, because logically in the rules, that's what this card should do. It should immediately destroy itself. So, yeah. Wrath of God. Yeah. Great art from Quentin Hoover. I've always liked this abstract god back here. He's like, he pissed me off. It's a pretty comic panel-ish illustration, but it just looks really good. All these dead guys. Air Elemental. I have a soft spot for Air Elemental, who is a bad Sarah Angel. If you're not playing white, you can use Air Elemental instead, which is a significantly worse card, but still a pretty good control finisher, all things considered. I had a Battle of Wits deck, which was mono blue. Battle of Wits, it's a long story, but the deck was 250 cards, so it had a lot of mediocre stuff in it, but I was surprised how often it would win with Air Elemental instead of Battle of Wits, because it just came up, and I just had islands and counter spells and Air Elemental, and that turned out to be good enough. It happens. Ancestral Recall, the best card in Magic, asterisk. Draw 3 cards. One of the most important, rules, not rules, but like strategic principles that comes out in the early days of Magic is that drawing 3 cards, the advantage you get, the card advantage of spending 1 card to draw 3, is kind of like if Swords to Plowshares destroyed 3 creatures instead of just 1. Like, it's really powerful. Trading 1 card for 3. in the abstract. Now, there's also reasons why creatures in play represent resources that you've invested time and energy in, and that's different. That also is strategically really interesting. But in the abstract, that's why Ancestral Recall is the best card in Magic. In a pure sense, you're going up 3 cards by only spending 1. So, in case you were curious, I'm not sure why he's in like Chichen Itza or somewhere like that, but okay. Animate artifact. This is really bad. It's so enchant non-creature artifact is like such a specific. It makes an artifact into a creature, but it's expensive. It's bad. You're putting a lot of eggs in one basket for no good reason. So yeah. Blue Elemental Blast. Now this is famously, you can use a lace to turn something red and then use Blue Elemental Blast to destroy it for just 2 mana, which is probably the most interesting all the color hoser stuff ever gets. But yeah, it's a thing. Brain Geyser. I always loved this art. Mark Tedin, by the way, is one of the defining Magic artists. And he can't seem to resist drawing a giant brain thing all the time. But it's the fact that there's several brains. Like we're on some kind of brain dimension where people's brains are exploding. Like I always liked that. This was one of the cards back in the day that was it was it was restricted. It was one of the original slate of restricted in vintage cards, along with Demonic Tutor, Balance. Looking at it now, it's like it's not that good. Like you're not getting that good of a deal for the amount of mana you spend to draw X cards. It's still pretty good. But yeah, and it was always funny that you can force your opponent to draw X cards and kill them, potentially. Clone. I always liked this card. If I'm honest, I don't like this art very much. It's another one that's kind of has like a children's book, almost like a Where's Waldo, which I mean, I guess is appropriate for the concept, right? We're trying to tell the difference between these two people. Yeah, art could be more interesting. And I'm probably only saying this because eventually we're going to get to Vesuvan Doppelganger. But four mana to copy something is pretty good. Like Clone was a good card back in the day because you'd spend 4 mana and you'd get something. You'd get like a Sengir Vampire or something, or you'd use Control Magic and you'd take their Sengir Vampire. This card is crazy. Yeah. Overly elaborate rules text. Modern rules text. You control enchanted creature. Thank you. Copy artifact. It's always weird that it's an enchantment. We didn't get color artifacts for a long time, and it took even longer for them to become, like now in modern Magic, it's kind of just a standard thing that there can be artifacts in the colors instead of colorless. And it's good for the balance of the game for that to be the case. It gives artifacts an outlet to be stronger than colorless cards should be in the abstract. Anyways, we'll talk about that. I have a revised copy artifact. $90, $2,000 for the alpha version. So yeah, I wish I had that version. Counterspell. I remember Counterspell being weirdly hard to find, like just because everybody wanted 4 counterspells. And it was an uncommon, but I feel like it was harder to get your hands on them than other uncommons. Maybe just because they were in so much demand. Anyways, 2 blue mana, counter a spell. Stop anything from happening. Yeah. This is a little too strong. Famously, I don't know if it's famously, but the joke used to always be that the strongest card in Magic is Island because you use it to cast Counterspell. Preacher Bond, bad card. There's a lot of these cards that are like Oh, if something happens, this might matter. This definitely feels more like a black card. I think black starts getting cards like this in like Mirage, Drain Power, stuff having to do with like interacting with your opponent's mana kind of goes away just because it's easier for the game to just not get into rules argument about that stuff, I think. Like, oh, I'm tapping your lands. Well, in response, I'm tapping them. Well, I'm draining your mana. Well, in response, I'm spending the mana. It's like we could just not mess with that stuff. Um, Here's another interesting Douglas Schuler bland background. This feels very superhero, like not just the outfit, but like energy is being absorbed from me. It's not bad, but again, you get this like, is having the background all be this flat color? It doesn't really look that good on a card, actually. Like, it's interesting because you can see the thinking there, but it doesn't really work that well. Whereas things that are a little more elaborate and textured, like this more Art Deco um, colored pencil art from Quentin Hoover, ends up looking so good on Magic cards. Um, Magic art went more towards realism for a long time, and I feel like it's only been in recent years they've started having where they'll be like, here's a special version of the card where we've gone like wild with the cool like Art Deco stuff, which makes me happy. I appreciate um, both things. Like it is Magic does look better as a game on the whole now than it used to, just because it's more consistent. But also they are willing to push those boundaries sometimes. Flight. I feel like this is an example. Like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm like picking on any of the artists. Anson Maddox, maybe the best artist in early Magic. Like, he Anson Maddox has some real great Magic art. This is not one of them because what, like, okay, the card is flight. Is she flying? Is she falling? Is she jumping on someone? What? It's cut off awkwardly. But no one knew, right? No one. This wasn't an established industry yet. Like, what was going to look good on this card? And maybe the art direction for this said something different than what it ended up being. You know, one of the things that you see in early Magic art is sometimes art that was made for some purpose gets reused for something else sometimes. I don't think that's the case here, but there is this disconnect sometimes where you're like I don't dislike it, but it's just like, what, why am I being shown this picture? Why is there so much pink on this blue card? You know, it's like it's something they move away from. Invisibility. Yeah, that's pretty much what that looks like. Target creature can't be blocked except by walls. Um, Walls are a funny thing in Magic because they're creatures, but they're inanimate objects, but they're creatures because they function like creatures. So for a while they stopped doing walls, but eventually they came back because it just kind of feels right. Jump. Here's one on the other hand that does feel very much like this is what the art direction called for, was a guy jumping over like a castle parapet. Like, target creature gains flying until end of turn. That's pretty much what that looks like. It is funny how like what kind of a there's so much of the idiosyncrasies of the art. Why, what is this guy's funky helmet? Why has he got these handlebars on his helmet? Right. It's just that kind of fantasy thing of it. It kind of looked cool. It kind of looked heavy metal album cover-ish. So that was what we did. Life Tap, here's another color hoser. Here's another one where we've got a bunch of this kind of pink, kind of magenta color on a blue background, which is interesting. It's interesting, but it feels very off model compared to the way that modern Magic cards look. Yeah. Again, I think it's fascinating. And so much even of the flaws of these cards, the design of the very first Magic set is part of what makes it compelling and fascinating. So here's Lord of Atlantis, who's a very colorful fellow indeed. Um, it's very funny. Here's all merfolk get +1/+1, and there's also a goblin that does this in alpha, but it takes them so long. It takes them years to get around to doing more cards like this that are like, all elves get +1/+1. They don't even do that for a while, and it's so funny in retrospect. They weren't like, what do people want to see? How about something that boosts all of their favorite creature type? I don't know. Again, nobody knew. Magical hack. So here's the kind of card that was so fascinating when I got into the game that ultimately I have to admit has no real fun use. You change the text of target spell, replacing a land type with another. What this lets you do is color hose people even when they weren't going to be affected by your color hoser. And that's just boring. But changing the text was a cool concept. It's like, I'm glad it's in there, but I'm glad that they tried it and moved on to ideas that were more fun. Mahamoti Jin, again, like Air Elemental, I have kind of a soft spot for this guy because he's a big blue creature who's nondescript, but he came down and he was large. Genies, uh, later get kind of fleshed out into they tend to have some kind of a drawback, in keeping with that 1001 Arabian Nights kind of story. Like you get power, but it comes with a catch. They tend to be more like that. This one is just big blue guy. Mana short. Here's another one that tries to tap your opponent's lands. I here's one. Part of why it's fascinating is because I think that looks really good as a Magic card. Like what is that? It's a rose on a flat gradient background on a Magic card, and it looks great. I don't know. I'm glad they don't make cards that do this tap all this stuff is. It was just more of a headache than it was worth. Merfolk of the Pearl Trident, basic Merfolk, not much to talk about. Phantasmal Forces. Got to pay mana to keep them around. Some of these alpha cards leave in it says controller must spend you during upkeep, which is supposed to be a blue mana symbol, but they forgot to fix it before going to print. Phantasmal Terrain, again, change a land type. It's not really worth the trouble. I always liked. Now this art I think looks really cool. The weird like ghost mouth thing. Like, what is this one mouth? Is this a bunch of mouths? Like, what is going on here? It's just a phantom monster, just a 3/3 with flying, but I like that art. Pirate ship. There's this whole thing of creatures needing to have islands because there's a water related. Why is a ship a creature though? This is something they struggle with for a long time before they come up with the vehicle type. This card is just kind of, it's expensive and it doesn't do much. Here's Power Leak. which is like feedback, except they can pay to stop the damage. Damage, we in the design of Magic, it's kind of there's a term for things that's like taxing effects, and the ones that do damage pretty much ended up in red, and the ones that cost mana pretty much go to white. Blue doesn't really do this kind of stuff anymore, I don't think. It's also not that interesting. It's not that powerful. Like, here's a card that you can just pay to have it not do anything. I guess that does lead to things like Rhystic Study, where they just kind of spam in multiplayer. They kind of spam everybody with, do you want to pay to stop the thing from happening? Do you want to pay? Do you want to pay? Power Sink, X mana to counter a spell that costs X. None of these counterspells are as good as Counterspell, which does it for 2 mana, but this one was pretty good. It has a tap all their lands and drain their mana, which again is kind of annoying things rules wise, but it was a bonus that you get on Power Sink that you don't get on like Spell Blast, which we haven't seen yet. Prodigal Sorcerer. Now, and here's one. Douglas Schuler again, the flat background. And if you look at this on a technical level, like, that's not a great painting of a weird guy with a beret, but it is a painting of a weird guy with a beret on a Magic card. It looks really good on a Magic card. I don't know why. Why does his purple hat look good on this Magic card? His weird, like, what is he wearing? I don't know, but it works. This is another thing where it's doing damage, so it ended up in red. We wouldn't have this as a blue card. A lot of stuff got moved out of blue because blue is the best color. Here's more blue direct damage that needed to get more toys that need to be taken away from blue. Psychic Venom. I like this art. It's another damage thing. Yeah. Sea Serpent's another one that can't attack unless someone has an island. Meh. Just a really boring card, frankly. Siren's Call. Here's an interesting card. There's some cards early on that have this thing where it's just like a creature has to attack or it will die. Which, again, not something that blue ends up being able to do in the long run. But this is a great card to just slip into your commander deck and completely take people by surprise by forcing someone into an all-out attack. And the art is weird and cool. Again, Anson Maddox. I think Anson Maddox is the one of the artists who you really have a sense that they have a vision that is going beyond what Magic wants to be. And so Magic art, as it moves into something more standardized, does lose something by not having this like freaky stuff going on. And it's a double-edged sword. I love the way the color looks on this one. The pink, the yellow, the purple, and the way that all looks against the blue border is really interesting. That one, on the other hand, again, I don't want it to sound like I'm making fun of the artist because they didn't know what it was going to look like. This was the first time anybody made something like this. It's a purple brain. Again, it's a change the text. I really wanted this card to be good. I had a whole deck around Sleight of Mind, and all of this color manipulation stuff just wasn't fun, ultimately. Spell Blast. It's Power Sink, but worse. Stasis. Now, see, here's one where people talk about talk about how bad this art is, but honestly, I think this is one of the better ones we've looked at today because it grabs you and like you don't know what's going on, but this card does kind of put you in prison. It kind of binds your arms and blindfolds you and puts you on a teeter totter of like, what's going on? It feels, this feels right as the art for Stasis. And maybe it's just nostalgia talking, but I like it. And I like how weirdly non-realistic it is, non-realistically proportioned the characters are. Thumbs up from me. There's a lot of these friggin' cards, aren't there? Steel Artifact, yeah. Thought Lace, yeah. Time Walk, turns out taking an extra turn is really strong and does a lot of stuff that really ought to be in other colors, like giving you extra attacks and untapping your lands. Time Twister. My brain is struggling to think of something to say about Time Twister. It's really strong. It draws 7 cards. It's one of the power 9, but it's maybe, is Time Twister the card that least deserves to be in the power 9? We'll have to think about that. Twiddle. Twiddle is a pretty weak card, but I love the name. I love that there's a card. This is an action you can take in this game that is called Twiddle, and you go boop 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 boop. Unsummon. This is a strategically interesting card. Return creature to owner's hand. Enchantments on creature are card ed. That's probably supposed to be discarded, which also is not consistent terminology with where magic rules go in the future. But unsummon cannot be played during the damage dealing phase of an attack. It's been a while since I thought about the old rules, but I feel like you can't do anything during the damage dealing phase of an attack. Anyways, return target creature to its owner's hand. Unsummon is an underrated card. 1 mana, it takes something off the board. There's better cards, like Chain of Vapor is a really interesting one for multiplayer. But it's simple, and all that stuff I was talking about with Ancestral Recall, like the opposite of the abstract benefit, you're spending a card and it's not destroying that card, but it is taking away all of the time and energy that someone invested in it. And that also is strategically interesting. Vesuvan Doppelganger. Is this my favorite card in Alpha? This art is so good. It's a clone that can change what it is every turn, but it stays blue, which is kind of a cute little bonus that my Vesuvan Doppelganger stays blue even when it's a Serra Angel or a demon or whatever. Volcanic Eruption is a color hoser that you can't even work around it to make it more evil than it is, because it just needs, the only thing you can do is give your opponent mountains and then blow them up, which is not a good thing to do. So Wall of Air, very good at blocking flyers, blocks Serra Angel. Wall of Water, less interesting, doesn't fly. Water Elemental does not have the charm of Air Elemental, I have to say. Although he is trying to take this paddle, like, quit paddling me, dude. Random guy in a boat. Animate Dead. Now, I had a deck that was all about Animate Dead, and Skull of Orm, which brings back enchantments, and Dance of Many, which was an enchantment that made a clone token where I would whatever you play, I'm gonna copy it, or I'm gonna steal it, or I'm gonna kill it and animate it. It was slow and it's probably annoying, but that was for a while. That was my deck. I had a Legends Fallen Angel in it. Bad Moon, very simple card, but this I feel like this is a good one to talk about how cool the old border on the black cards, the old frame, like that just looks so good. This art is very minimalist from Jesper Myrfors, who is the art director. So he was probably rushing to get in some of these things quick. We need art for Bad Moon, but it looks good. You know, it's simple, but it looks really good. In terms of how it looks on a card, I think it looks better than some of the ones that have better art. I think don't look as good as Magic cards as this one does. This just looks very like, yeah, that's what a black Magic card should look like, which I guess makes sense if he was the art director. But yeah, so there's that. Yeah, so here's Black Knight, who's much more calm looking. And his art has, or his flavor text is this stuff. You don't ask why a plague spreads or a field burns. Don't ask why I fight. And then in the art, he's just kind of standing there like, hi, I'm a Black Knight. It's cool art. It's just, it's not dynamic the way that the quote is so dynamic. Bog Wraith, Swamp Walk, boring. Okay, Contract from Below. I said before, Ancestral Recall is the best card, asterisk, because Contract from Below, you can only use it if you're playing for ante, which nobody plays for ante. No one has played for ante in like 30 years because it meant you're risking cards in your deck. It was a thing where you were supposed to win cards from your opponent, but you were risking cards. Anyways, Contract from Below is discard your hand, draw 7 new cards. It's draw a whole new hand. It's Professor Oak in the Pokemon TCG. And if you could play it in any format, it would be the best Magic card because you're drawing 7 for 1 mana instead of 3. Cursed Land, take damage, having land. Sounds fun. Dark Ritual. Here's another one that's really simple, but it looks really good. Dark Ritual, super broken card that was just considered like balance, I suppose, considered to be an important part of the game, so I left it in. Dark Pact. Here's some great artwork that's being wasted on another anti card. Death Grip. Here's some more creepy Anson Maddox artwork that's being wasted on a color hoser. Death Lace. Here's some more artwork being wasted on a lace. Demonic Eternity. Here's another anti card. At least this one's kind of funny. The art has always reminded me of Pink Floyd, The Wall, the Gerald Scarf animation. I don't know. Demonic Hordes. Here's another really simplistic one, but I really like. I can't help but like these guys. I'm going to zoom in if I can get it to. They look like they're having a fun party. They're listening to some cool music. You know, there's a. I said cool music, and then I thought maybe they're listening to Limp Bizkit. They're a bunch of demons. They're destroying the land. I don't know. I like this guy's scraggly teeth. I like it. Not a fun card to play against. I'm breaking everything. Again, it destroys lands, and destroying lands is not very fun. So, Demonic Hordes. Demonic Tutor. Now, this was the card that the PTA really freaked out about back in the day. The guy's got a pentagram on his head. He's got another pentagram on his chest, presumably. He's got a weird leather strap shoulder thing. And he lives next to a volcano, so you know he's evil. Like this is practically the depiction of Satan from the South Park movie. Like that's basically him. Um, but yeah, this is why in Magic, anything that a spell that searches up another card is called a tutor because of this card. None of them look like they're gonna, you know, go outside for a smoke break after the lesson like this guy does. Drain life, does X damage, drains the life. Pretty obvious. Now here's one where I feel like this yellow, I don't know. It maybe it's kind of close to the parchment color of the frame, but it's different. Maybe it clashes a little bit. I feel like this yellow doesn't quite work. And the blue of his clothes is a little weird too. I don't know. It's another one that just feels kind of off model. Drudge skeletons. Black creatures regenerate because they're magical skeleton guys. Green creatures regenerate because they're nature magic things, which is cute. Evil presence, target land is a swamp. Yay. Fear. I always liked this artwork where she's like, skulls. Can we make this really big and have me? I can't see if I'm on top of this right, but like fear. Yeah, enchanted creature has fear is the modern wording. They made this into an ability, but they decided it would be better if it wasn't if the ability didn't have black creatures and artifact creatures baked into it. Like they made a version called Intimidate that worked differently for different colors. Eventually they went with an ability called Menace that I think has worked out really well. Frozen Shade. This is a bad card. You can spend as much black mana as you want, but by default you've paid 3 for a 0/1 that does nothing unless you spend more mana. So just baseline not that good. I think the gradient background works pretty well on this one. I think it looks good. Gloom. Sometimes these old cards are like, is that what's being depicted here? Like what was the art direction for this? I want you to draw gloom, and they come back with like the Simpsons. What's the anyways, color hoser, it's boring. It doesn't counter, it makes circles of protection suck. This art I always wondered about, because what is going on with the guy's, he's like got a brain sticking out, but there's hair follicles coming out of that, and his ears are weird. I don't know, he's a weird looking fellow. Not sure what kind of creature that's supposed to be. A demon? A beast? Howl from Beyond is a great card name, though. This becomes a red ability later on. This moves from black to red, giving +X/+0 as an instant. Hypnotic Spectre. This is one of the most infamous creatures. Like, if Serra Angel isn't the best creature in the set, it's probably Hypnotic Spectre, although that's mostly because Dark Ritual gets him into play on turn 1. And then he does this random discard whenever he hits someone that's just so cruel. The art is another one with a really bland background. I always kind of felt like Frozen Shade. Like maybe Hypnotic Spectre should have had this art instead. I think this art is cooler looking. It's more dynamic. I mean, this guy's a little more threatening with his spear, though, and his asymmetrical armor, his inexplicable loincloth. I don't know. Lich. Uh, this card is ridiculous, but again, this is one of those ones where I love that they tried this. You don't lose the game for having 0 less life. If you would gain life, draw that many cards. Whenever you're dealt damage, sacrifice that many non-token permanents, they've said, instead of cards. Yeah, the old phrasing is you lose if this enchantment is destroyed or if you suffer a point of damage without sending a card to the graveyard. Sure. But like this is a big mono black, which just costs 4 black mana. Loves to take a big swing. You know, put all the cards on the table. Like here goes my master plan. Lord of the Pit. Ah, that artwork. The weird rune thing, like what is that? It's always seems it's weird but perfect that he's kind of off center and there's this thing back here. I don't know. Lord of the Pit. 7/7 flying trample. That's a lot. Um, it's worth remembering that at the time when this set came out, the only creature bigger than Lord of the Pit is Force of Nature, who's an 8/8. So Lord of the Pit being 7/7 flying trample, that's a lot. He eats your creatures, and if he runs out of creatures to eat, he takes a bite out of you. But that just made it more exciting, you know? Lord of the Pit. Mind Twist. Very mean card. Another thing to spin your Dark Ritual on that makes your opponent lose all their cards at random. I always wondered with this art if he's supposed to be wearing like a dunce cap or something. Like the guy's got his head in his hands and he's got something on his head and I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. I don't know. Maybe it's his brain leaking out. Nether Shadow. Christopher Rush. This is a really like simple, almost like Disney Fantasia kind of well, he's not a demon, he's a shadow originally, a spirit in modern rules. Um, but it fits the card. He's a 1/1. He's a little dude that keeps coming back. This guy cares about the order of cards in your graveyard. He wants there to be creatures above him in the graveyard. Um, Pretty early on, they decide that this is another one of those things where the game just is so much more streamlined if we just don't have to care about the order of the graveyard. So that's kind of stops being a thing, unless you're playing with those cards specifically. Nettling Imp. I love how Quentin Hoover's his like cross-hatched pencils I think look so good on these early Magic cards. This does the Siren's Call ability on one creature at a time. Very much captures the mood of the imp who's like, I'm going to provoke you into doing something stupid. Nightmare. Now that's just cool. They probably wouldn't put this much fire on a black card nowadays, but this one here by contrast, I think that yellow looks really good, even though it does, like these colors clash a little bit with the frame in a way that they probably wouldn't do now. But it looks cool. Big flaming horse. I always loved Nightmare. It's a little overcosted for what you get, but the fact that it could get bigger, you know, like this, if you keep putting down swamps, eventually this will be bigger than Lord of the Pit. Might even get bigger than Force of Nature. You know, like that. That was always cool. Paralyze. Tap a creature, make it really expensive to untap. This is an underrated card. For a long time, I feel like this was one of the only centaurs in magic art. It took them a while to do centaurs, I think. Pestilence. There's cards that are just like, wow, that card is annoying to play against. Does one damage to all creatures and players? Sure, why not? And the art is like, I don't know what I was expecting it to look like. I'm not happy that it looks like this. Plague Rats, yes. I have a Plague Rats deck. Um, Plague Rats were kind of ruined by the four of a card rule, which didn't exist when Alpha first came out. When this set first came out, you could play as many Plague Rats as you get your hands on. And then they added later on to contain the game somewhat. You can only have four copies of any card. And eventually they made a card, they made several cards actually, that capture the original field where they say on them you can play as many copies of this as you want. But I have a soft spot for the original Plague Rats because that's what I had. I have back home in a box somewhere a deck that's got like 30 Plague Rats in it. Raised Dead. This is another very basic, like, what did you expect this card to look like? The thing that I think is interesting about Raised Dead is that green has a card called Regrowth that can bring any card from a graveyard to your hand. But it's interesting to think about why Raised Dead is a black card and Regrowth is a green card. And sometimes they do the exact same thing, but it feels right. We can talk about that when we get to Regrowth. Royal Assassin, tap to destroy a tapped creature. In early Magic, there was a lot of the time you got in these situations that I think of as like kind of like Cold War situations where it's like I've got my assassin and I can tap it to kill your creature, but as soon as I do that, you're going to tap your guy to your prodigal sorcerer to do damage to my royal assassin. So I'm going to tap my guy to protect my, you get into these like, it was a really different early Magic. I feel like the strategy got bogged down in a lot of these like details that go around in circles, and it's not that they're bad, but I'm glad that the game overall avoids those kind of hangups. Sacrifice a creature. They hadn't come up with the word sacrifice yet, had they? Destroy one of your creatures without regenerating it. Now we say sacrifice. Black mana equal to the mana value. Makes sense. Not as good as Dark Ritual, not as good as other cards that come later. Like the one that gives you 4 black mana for sacrificing any creature. I can't remember what it's called, but anyways. Scathe Zombies. Again, like the Pearl Unicorn. Good quote from a real world literary source. Boring card. That sure is some zombies with no abilities. Scavenging Ghoul. Boring. Sengir Vampire. Again, poor blue only gets air elemental, while white and black get much cooler options. Sengir Vampire gets bigger whenever it kills something, basically. And the art is like funky. Like, what? What? Very not what modern magic art looks like, but very cool. Yeah, Sengir Vampire. That is a pretty rad magic card. Simulacrum. Here's one that black doesn't really get to do anymore. It's also, you gain life equal to the damage dealt to you this turn. And then it does that damage to target creature. That feels more like a white ability. Sinkhole. Now this 2 mana to destroy a land is maybe like just the most unpleasant card you could imagine to play against in Magic. Like, you're just going to destroy my land and it's only cost you 2 mana. but it does look really good, doesn't it? As one of these early black cards that just it has 4 words on it. The art is a picture of what it is. It's a hole in the ground that eats your land. Iconic. Can't argue with that. Again, iconic. Terror. I think I read that this guy, Ron Spencer, intended for this guy to be like huddled up in the bottom corner instead of up in the top, but either way it's pretty effective. This way it makes it kind of look like he's afraid of what's below him rather than what's above, which kind of makes sense. Unholy Strength. Now this card is maybe most famous for getting reprinted in 4th edition with the pentagram censored. Yeah. Unholy Strength of a guy who's stretching, yawning. For some reason, he's feeling inspired by something, but certainly nothing satanic. Yeah. Unholy Strength. Wall of Bone. Anson Maddox can draw some compelling bones. But yeah, that's a Wall of Bones. Warp Artifact. I think this is... Amy Weber also illustrates Copper Tablet. I think this is meant to be that card being destroyed. But it is very... like... Warp that artifact. Weakness. That's a boring card. And why does he have... He only has 3 fingers on each hand. And maybe no thumbs? Like, what's going on with this card? I don't know. They can't all be winners. Will-o'-the-Wisp. I always liked, like, the name, the fact that it's just it's a thing that hangs around and regenerates. It's a boring card to play against because it just soaks up damage for the whole game. But it's something about early Magic that felt evocative. I summon my Will-o'-the-Wisp. Word of Command. Here's another minimalist Jesper Mirforce piece that I feel like this one does not impress me. I've heard people say that they find that the eyes staring out of the darkness really compelling. I don't know. I'll take the Bad Moon art over this one. The idea of controlling your opponent temporarily later gets fleshed out into a concept, which is controlling a player's turn. So this kind of eventually, this is a card that kind of doesn't work for that well on it the way it's phrased, but they do a version of it later that makes more sense. Zombies gain Swamp Walk and regenerate for a black mana. Yay. This is another one that kind of just looks like a guy hanging out. Like he could just be in like Canada. I don't know. He could be yelling about local sports team, hockey. Don't know. Burrowing. Here's one where I feel like this is obviously too cartoonish for Magic. Again, they had to figure this out. But it also makes the creature too interesting. The focus is supposed to be on we're giving something Mountain Walk, the ability to pass seamlessly through mountain terrain. And is that what's going on here? It's not bad art by any means. It just doesn't feel like it's achieving the goal. And then there's Chaos Lace, which is eye-searing, but I can't help but love. It's called Chaos Lace, first of all, which is a great name. It does this turns something red, and then you can use Blue Elemental Blast to destroy it. Okay. Mostly I just think I love the concept. I love the name Chaos Lace, and the art is like, what the fuck? Disintegrate. Oh man, look at that. That is so cool. This is probably the best looking red card in terms of like this is what a red card should look like. Like dragon whelp. Another thing that's surprising is that there aren't very many dragons early on. There's Shivan dragon, which we'll get to. Dragon whelp. There's not like a huge presence of dragons, compared to goblins or merfolk. Dragon whelp is cute. It kind of seems like for that size, he should be cheaper and smaller, but whatever. Dwarven demolition team. Tap to destroy a wall. Again, it's a little bit cartoonish. And like I was saying with like the whole Lord of the Rings thing of like when we have dwarves as a race, like what are we talking about exactly? Dwarven warriors. One of those things that modern fantasy really had to like, and still does, honestly, need to wrestle with this idea of like these people are different and therefore we can say like make sweeping statements about they're all greedy or whatever. Earth elemental. I want to like Earth elemental because he's silly. he's like he looks like a potato. And I would like to love him for that, but he's just kind of boring. He's a 4/5. Oh well. Earthbind, aka Quentin Hoover gets horny on main. Very good art, I would have to say. Maybe goes in a direction that they didn't mean to go. Enchant flying creature. Yeah, this hits something with flying. It kills Hypnotic Spectre. That was the important thing. That was why we played it. And for the artwork. Earthquake. Here's another one of the ones that kind of looks like this could be some random dude in a backyard who's just falling over. Really good card. Earthquake. X damage to each player and each non-flying creature. Good stuff. And a neat parallel to Hurricane in green that does damage to flying creatures. False Orders. This one, I've never like looked at this in detail. This is one where it's kind of funny. Like what exactly is being illustrated here in this artwork? I'm trying to zoom in. It's like, I'm going to catapult over the mountain. No idea. I think it's fair to say it looks pretty boring as magic art. Like it's just a piece of paper. This kind of thing, you decide whether and how one defending creature blocks. This is just like too complicated for the rules to handle at the time. They do eventually do stuff kind of like this later. Fire elemental. This one seems pretty cartoonish to me, or comic booky, I would say. But it's always kind of a fine line of like how comic booky does magic art want to be. I don't know. It's cool. More memorable than the potato elemental. Fireball. And now this one, again, no, Mark Tedin is amazing. I always felt like this one looked like a delicious meatball being flung across a restaurant. I don't know. Fire breathing. The framing on this one always seems so weird to me. Like, I don't know. It's cool though. Like this is like what I'm talking about when I say there's not that much dragon content. Like this is one of the. I feel like this is one of the rare appearances of a dragon in this set. Color hoser. Yep, that's what flash fires would look like pretty much. Fork. I like Fork. I feel like this is not Amy Weber's best artwork. I I don't know. Again, I don't want to get mean about the artwork, but this one, I don't know. It doesn't do it for me. Goblin Balloon Brigade. They're goblins, but now they can gain flying. Controller may not choose to make goblins fly after they have been blocked. I like how they just dropped that line because, I mean, ultimately, you can do that. It just doesn't matter anymore. Goblin King. Here's goblins gain mountain walk and +1/+1. While this card remains in play as the kind of thing they felt like they had to specify early on. Weird artwork on this one. Like, I don't know if I would have assumed that this was a goblin if he didn't appear on a card with the word goblin in the title. Like, I don't know. Granite Gargoyle. Pretty good flying creature for red. Famously contains the original quote from Asmora Namardika Deist Nicole Dakar, who eventually gets her own magic card once they figure out how to have a card with no mana cost so they could use the entire top of the card for the name. Grey Ogre, another 3 mana 2/2 that doesn't do anything and is just boring. Hill Giant, repeat with slightly different numbers. Hurloon Minotaur, same except with really cool artwork that they tried to like make this card one of the mascots of Magic, but it's just the card doesn't do anything. So no. Ironclaw Orcs. The like story of this card is that eventually someone figured out that if you get a bunch of good enough red cards, creatures and direct damage together, you can kind of win in spite of individual cards not being that good. Keldon Warlord, big as however many creatures you have. Yeah. Oh, he's a human barbarian now. It did always seem kind of boring that he was just a lord. He was a summon lord. He's got too fancy of a hat to just be a lord. He's got to be a human barbarian. His sword is so big that I forget that he's riding a horse. I feel like that doesn't look like it. Is he standing next to the horse and not riding it? Is that why the sword is so? I don't know. The sword is too big in any reckoning. Oh well. Okay, we're making progress. Lightning Bolt. That is a magic card. This is like the most pure direct damage spell. 1 mana, 3 damage. Simple, effective. Good stuff. Yup. Mana Flare. This one, I always felt like this art is like what it looks like when Doctor Doom gets a cosmic cube or whatever, and he's like, ah. I like Mana Flare. This kind of card is considered green now, not red, which makes sense. Mana Barbs. I always thought the barbs, they look cool. Like, this is a really annoying card to play against. Just whenever you use a land, you take damage. Great. Sounds fun. But at least it's cool looking points of damage. Goblins that do nothing. Hooray. Orcish Artillery. Here's another one. This one has this misprint. So does Orcish Oriflamme. They're misprinted with a lower mana cost than they're supposed to have. This card, eventually people would figure out that in the right deck is quite good because it does 2 extra damage, and that you can find uses for 2 extra damage. It's a lot better if it only costs 2 than 3 though. This card less so, but still it's okay. Power Surge is another punish you for not tapping or tapping your lands or whatever. Yeah. Raging River wants it. The idea is that it splits up the battlefield into 2 sides of a river, but it just never. It doesn't affect flying creatures, and so even if you want to make a deck around Raging River, all you end up doing is making a deck that's flying. It's all flying advantage, and that's boring. So yeah, even when they've brought this back on joke cards like Space Beleren, I've been like, not worth it. Just don't. Red Elemental Blast combined with Thought Lace. Yeah. I like the art better on Red Elemental Blast than blue. It's also notable because it counters counterspells. I feel like red was more notable for that reason. Rock of Courageous, it's a red phantom monster. And it's a bird now. The original one's just rock. That's about all there is to say. And then there's Rock Hydra, which is the original Hydra. This eventually becomes a green creature type as well. Hydra's good for representing growth. This one's pretty bad because it just loses counters all over the place, right? Whenever it takes damage, it loses a counter. Yeah. More trouble than it's worth. Sedge Troll, pretty good. If you've got swamps, it is a pretty cost-effective creature. And it's a troll. Shatter. That's a good like it's basic. It's an amulet getting broken, but it's dynamic. That's pretty good art. I like how it's off center. I like the framing of that one. Shivan Dragon. This is very like kids storybook style art, but I like how it's like the dragon is reaching out to grab us. That's pretty good. Shivan Dragon is not that great. I mean, it's 6 for a 5/5 with flying. It's big for the old days, but I'd probably rather have Lord of the Pit. In the long term, that might not be as good of an investment, but more impressive looking anyways. Smoke. I always wonder what's going on with the little, like, you can make out like vague outlines of, there's like a wizard on the mountain doing his version of the Tim the Enchanter routine. But it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell like what's happening. But I think there's like a little guy with a wizard hat making all this smoke. And then everyone only gets to untap 1 creature, so everything's really boring. Stone Giant. Throws a creature, gives it flying, and then it dies. This is an idea they come back to in different forms over the years, the idea of throwing a creature. Okay, Stone Rain destroys a land, costs 3 instead of 2, like Sinkhole, so it's a little less evil. And that is pretty much art of some guys getting hit by stones. So, there you go. Tunnel. Yeah, that's a tunnel. Destroy 1 wall. Can't be regenerated. Wall of Bone can't survive a tunnel. 2-headed giant. Can block 2 attacking creatures. This card, there's a whole format called 2-headed giant, so you'd think the card itself would be more important, but it's just kind of not that good. Blocking 2 creatures isn't as useful as you might think. Here's another troll that regenerates. This one's a little goofier looking. But like muscular. It doesn't, like, I wouldn't want to mess with that troll either. Wall of Fire. Just like Wall of Water, and neither of them is that interesting. I need to cut my fingernails. I'm having trouble pinching and stretching on my thing. I was like a Wall of Stone has a llama on it. Because why not? Wheel of Fortune. Man. This is probably the card that I regret most not getting back in the day. Because I played during the time of Revised Edition. And I have like at least one of most of those old cards. I traded away all the dual lands because I wasn't interested in investment value, let's say. Um, but I do kind of regret that I didn't get a Wheel of Fortune just because it's such an iconic red card. People use this to do evil things in multiplayer, making everybody discard their hands and stuff. But it's Wheel of Fortune. Aspect of Wolf. I tried to make that card anything, and it just isn't. Power and toughness increased by half the number of forests you have. Berserk, on the other hand, the weird Dan Fraser background is like has such a different effect on this card than the other ones. Double a creature's power, give it trample, and then it dies. Is like it's very iconic early Magic card. And like surprisingly not that like that's a risky card to print in any era. Doubling something's power is risky. But I feel like this card is surprisingly close to being fair, and it has so many funny uses where you can berserk somebody else's creature in multiplayer just to make things really interesting. Birds of Paradise. Birds of Paradise is maybe the most expensive card that I'm willing to buy a copy of just to have in decks that I like. It tends to be like a $5 to $10 card. Well, this shows the cheapest one being $8, but whatever. You get my drift. It gives you a mana of any color. It's really good. Birds of Paradise. Camouflage. Here's another one of those really more complicated than it should be. But this does stuff with face down creatures, which eventually will come back as a whole mechanic once they figure out how to do it right. Channel. Famously, you can turn all of your life into mana with Channel and then cast Disintegrate or Fireball to just end the game on the spot. This card, other than that, this card is not that good. It's just again, it's one where there's no guardrails. Most of the time, this is a bad deal because you're spending 2 mana and you're gaining the ability to pay your life to turn it into mana. And it's just the fact that you start off with 20 life that means this is dangerous territory. But I tried to make a deck once where I was like, I'm going to channel and cast like Juggernaut. And it just was not that good. Cockatrice. You need a creature to block flyers in your green deck. In the old days, this was what you went with. There's also a Thicket Basilisk. That's the same thing without flying. Crawworm. Man, I wanted Crawworm to be good. The art is really cool. When you're just starting out Magic and you have a revised starter deck and you have a Crawworm and a Fire Breathing, you really want to put those cards together and you really want them to be good. But yeah. Elvish Archers, which is misprinted as a 1/2 for some reason, and it's a 2/1 later. First Strike is not supposed to be green like at all, but here you go. I always thought the symbol on his arm was interesting. Magenta. Anson Maddox likes magenta. It's a good color. Fast bond. Here's another one of those dangerous ones. You can put in as many lands into play as you want each turn. It does a damage to you for each beyond the first. So you can just play out all your lands. The sad thing about this card is that, like, maybe, I don't know, like, how often is this actually good? When it's really good, but you need the right combination of fast bond, a lot of lands, but also some threats that fit the amount of lands that you have. So, like, it was really random. Fog, prevent all combat damage that we dealt this turn. Simple, but effective. Okay, Force of Nature. Here's the original biggest creature in the game, 8/8 trample. You must pay GGGG, or he does 8 damage to you. But you can still attack. Lord of the Pit also does damage to you if you fail to pay, but so the modern phrasing, it probably got reprinted with different text. Like, this makes it sound like you have to pay the green if you have it, but this text doesn't say it that way, so yeah. Force of Nature. Not as cool as Lord of the Pit, but he is larger, and you have to give him that. Fungasaur. Love the name. The art kind of just delivers on that concept. He's a fungus dinosaur. It took a long time for dinosaur to really come into its own as a creature type. Like, there were a couple of cards that were like this, that are like, I'm maybe a dinosaur, but it wasn't until Ixalan that they were like, right, we're doing dinosaurs now. And I could not complain. Whoops. Gaia's Liege. Here's a card that I wanted to be good. You know what? I remember trading a dual land. I want to say it was a Tundra for one of these guys. And that Tundra is like $1,000 card now. And this guy in revised edition is $1.60. So yeah, not my best decision. I might have traded for this and something else, but I was not very picky. I was just more interested in cool creatures than lands. He's as big as a number of forests. He can make forests, but it takes a long time for this guy to get anywhere. Giant Growth. +3/+3 until end of turn. Yay. It's not 3 damage. It's not 3 cards. But it's better than gaining 3 life or preventing 3 damage. And you gotta give it that. Giant Spider. That is a giant spider. Does not fly, but can block flying creatures. Reach was a good word that they eventually came up with for that ability. Grizzly Bears, the original bears, 2 mana, 2/2. He's a bear. He's kind of cute. Bear. Hurricane. All players and flying creatures suffer X damage. This is, like, very definitely not something that green gets to do anymore. But green used to be able to do X damage to all players. And that came up pretty often. Ice Storm. Now here's the green version of Stone Rain, because everybody needs a direct damage or a land destruction spell, I guess. Wouldn't do for green to be left out of the party. I do like this. There's a lot of art in early Magic that's just like a random guy. I feel like this one works pretty well. I like the frost I like the frost in his beard and on his gloves and stuff. Yeah, I like that one. I, I don't like the card because it's land destruction, but I like the art. Instill energy, whereas this one's just kind of boring. But such a vague, the name is so vague. Instill energy. Sure. Just an example of things being way more complicated than they need to be. Ironroot Treefolk. He's a 3/5. He's expensive. Why? Kudzu. It's very funny to me that Kudzu is a card in the very first Magic set. This idea of like an enchantment that represents a disease that comes back and spreads. This is an idea they'll come back to. Like Tackle Maggot is an example of one from Legends. Ley Druid. This guy always seemed overcosted, but there was combos you could do with him. Why has he got long fingernails? It's very interesting. They were a lot looser with creature types back in the day. Like now he's a druid, because, yeah, he's a druid. He's a creature human druid. But human wasn't a creature type yet. Evidently, druid wasn't either. So he's a cleric, but his text asks you to tap druid as if that was his name. Well, I mean, I guess it is. Just funny. Yeah. Life Force, another color hoser with vaguely disturbing artwork. Life Lace, another lace. Yawn. Living Artifact. What the hell? I feel like that's what early Magic is like. When you're flipping through cards, you're like, huh, yawn. What the hell? What is going on here? It's just a way to gain life in a really clunky way. Living Lands. I like this art. He's like, I am grass monster. Makes all your forests 1/1s. Look at how much simpler the modern text is compared to all of this. Now they can be enchanted, killed, and so forth. And they can be tapped either for mana or to attack. Llanowar Elves. Taps for green mana. This is one of the, like, iconic cards. Green. Costs 1 green mana. Comes down, gives you more green mana. Looks like a really mean dude, but he's actually a druid. He's an elf druid. Dunno. Can't always judge people by their weird wicker skull caps. Lure. All creatures able to block enchanted creature do so. And then a whole bunch of other text that you don't need. Natural Selection. I've always loved this art. I don't have this one. I never got this one because it's a rare, right? It's actually like worth money. Yeah. Oh, it wasn't reprinted in revised edition. That's why. Um, so yeah, it's kind of a bad card, but I just Bird head tiger body man contemplates his orb. How can I not give that a thumbs up? Regeneration. I'm always a fan of the Quentin Hoover Art Deco colored pencils look. I think this is a really good one. Regeneration later gets taken out of the game just because the rules kind of evolve in a different direction from the way that regeneration and damage prevention work in the early days. So yeah. Oh yeah, and there's regrowth. Like I was saying, regrowth is a green card. Raised Dead is a black card. They do very similar things, and I wouldn't change it. But it's just there's so much so much of the history of the evolution of the game is like figuring out these things. Like why is one of those green and one of those black? Scripts Rates. Little flying green guy. Shannon Dryads, little green forest walking guy. I always liked this artwork. There's a later one. Yeah, well, I'm not going to go searching for printings of Shannon and Dryad, but there's some other art for that card that I think is cool. Stream of Life, X, gain X life. That's bad. Turns out, I mean, again, this was the first game of its kind. They had to figure this stuff out. X mana for X damage, X mana for X life. One of those is good and one of those is not. Thicket Basilisk, the non-flying cockatrice. Not sure why we needed both. Thicket Basilisk is better to put lure onto to make other creatures block it. But yeah. Timberwolves. Banding. Even green has to have a banding creature. I wanted wolves to be good early on in the game when there were only a few wolf cards and they were not good. Tranquility. Here's one that has boring artwork, but it fits, the concept of the card, obviously. Tranquility. Shut up, all you enchantments. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. Tsunami, destroy all islands. Yawn. The artwork's pretty cool, actually. Verduran Enchantress. Here's another card that wasn't originally a human that now is a human. Cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Another thing that's green, but why? It feels like it should be a green card. I don't know. Wall of Brambles regenerates. In the old days, this wasn't the worst card. I mean, it like it says, it's Wall of Brambles. It's annoying to keep attacking into this thing that regenerates every time. So not great, but still. Wall of Ice, Wall of Wood, Wanderlust. Here's a abstract one. There's all of these things that are like, do 1 damage to someone to punish them for having some kind of a card, and they just get flavored in different ways. Wanderlust does sound like a green card. War Mammoth. He's like a hill giant, but he has trample. I like that Magic had mammoths right there on day 1. Web. Enchanted creature has reach, we would now say. Can block flying creatures, though it does not gain the power to fly. Wild Growth. Not as good as Llanowar Elves overall, but a good substitute. If you want more, 4 Llanowar Elves is not enough. Okay, now we're getting into the really miserable stuff. Ankh of Mishra. It's time for the artifacts. Whenever someone plays a land, they take 2 damage. Great. Basalt Monolith. Famous infinite recursion combo device because it can tap and then untap itself. Black Lotus, the most expensive card. Aside from, obscure one-of-a-kind printings and stuff like that. I have never gotten to play with a Black Lotus. I don't know if I've ever been in a game where someone actually played like a real Black Lotus. I didn't know, I knew people who had dual lands early on, but I didn't know people who had like the Power 9. So yeah, I don't know that I've ever played a Black Lotus that wasn't like generated as a token by some other card or something. Garth, what's his butt, makes a Black Lotus token. Black Vice. All these artifacts that just like punish you for doing stuff. This stuffy doll kind of becomes a famous character. Celestial Prism. That is a bad card. Chaos Orb. Now here's something that they stopped doing weird stuff like this. This is a card where you flip it onto the table and whatever it lands on gets destroyed. They stopped doing things like this except in the joke sets like Unglued and Unhinged, where they specifically made space to be like, here's some goofy ass stuff that we can't have in serious tournaments. That's a Chaos Orb. Like, I don't know. I don't know what a Chaos Orb is exactly, but that is what it looks like. Clockwork Beast. I always liked. There's a bunch of bad Magic cards that have Clockwork in their name that I played with, even though they're bad. You have to pay mana to wind it back up again. It loses its power over time. Conservator. Now there's a bad card. All it does is prevent damage, and it's so expensive. Copper Tablet. This is the one that I think is on Warp Artifact or something similar, anyways. It just does the damage to everybody. That's pretty basic. Crystal Rod. There's all these things that you can gain life for someone playing a spell of a particular color. That's kind of not all that interesting. Oh, God. You know you're in for a treat when you get these cards that are like, the original card is like Wall of Impenetrable Text, and then the modern phrasing is even bigger Wall of Impenetrable Text. Put a Mire counter on target non-swamp land. That land is a swamp for as long as it has a Mire counter on it. Activate during your upkeep. When this artifact is put into a grave from the battlefield, at the beginning of each of your upkeeps for the rest of the game, remove all Mire counters from a land that a Mire counter was put onto with this artifact, but that a Mire counter has not been removed from with this artifact. All it does is make something a swamp one at a time. But it's this. Mark the changed land with tokens. If Cyclopean Tomb is destroyed, remove one token of your choice each upkeep. So the game wants to like define how you treat all of those tokens after the card goes away. I don't know. That is way more trouble than it's worth. We're in the home stretch, guys. We're doing this. Dingus Egg. Now whenever a land leaves the battlefield, someone takes 2 damage. This card was like overrated early on. It was restricted at one point, which is weird, but like land destruction just needed to get kicked out of the game was what happened. Disrupting Scepter. Make people discard. This is much slower than Hypnotic Spectre and Mind Twist. But I feel like every once in a while this would show up in like at least in limited. Like people would play this in limited because you could wear someone down over the course of a game with this. Yeah. Force Field. Lose only 1 life to an unblocked creature. The modern version is prevent all but 1 of that damage. Again, there's too many defensive cards. Gauntlet of Might. Later on, like this boosts all red creatures and it makes all mountains add more mana. Later on, they do a card called Gauntlet of Power that costs 5, but you get to choose a color. Which it's weird that an artifact only really works in red decks. The art, I've always felt like the art on this one is a little bit funky. Like, I don't know. It looks like it's like assembled from cutouts. It's kind of surreal looking. It's not bad. Glasses of Urza. Just based on the names of a couple of cards, they decided that Urza and Mishra were going to be the first like story characters. This card is annoying to play against. Just because you're like, I'll look at your hand again. Like, okay. Helm of Chatsit gives something banding in case that's something you want to do. Why? This is one of those cases where I feel like they probably, when they made this card, they probably were thinking like a knight with a helmet on, and the artist came back with this H.R. Giger stuff. And that's just part of what makes early Magic so freaky. and like unpredictable. Howling Mine. Kind of, I feel like this gets off on iconic value. It's a very like simple and flat looking piece of art, and the ability is really simple. They added early on. It was a rule that artifacts turn off when they're tapped, which was like, what does that mean exactly? And it caused no end of confusion. So they eventually removed that. But a few of these old cards they added, if this artifact is untapped, they just added it to this card because this was one of the cards that people played that way by turning it off with, for example, Icy Manipulator, which is a great name of a Magic card. The art is just kind of like guy holding a crystal ball, but you know, it's cool and it's got a crazy name and it taps stuff. They really move away from like just tapping stuff as an ability. It I don't know. It's kind of boring in practice. Illusionary Mask. Here's another one that does stuff with face down creatures, which takes them a while to figure out how to make the rules work. Like again, here's a wall of even more impenetrable text. But basically, you can hide what you can summon a creature face down, and you can pay extra mana to disguise what it is. But it's like such a complex concept to try to get across in a card. Most infamously, this was used to put out Phyrexian Dreadnought, getting around its drawback where you had to sacrifice creatures first. Iron Star, another one of these guys. Ivory Cup, another one of these guys. Jade Monolith. Next time a source of your choice would deal damage to a target creature, this turn the source deals that damage to you instead. That's just a lot to pay for this like art. This, like, you might use that to save a creature, but why would you pay 4? Yeah. The art on this one I also feel like is weirdly, like, I just kind of don't know what's going on in this art. I like the colors, I like the textures. They can't all be winners. Jade Statue, an artifact that becomes a golem. It's interesting that they, the original printing, you're supposed to understand that it's got stats of 3/6, but it's an artifact, not a creature, and then it becomes a creature. The modern phrasing specifies it becomes a 3/6. Like, that's a lot to leave up to interpretation, especially that early on with the rules being as hazy as they were. JMD Tome. Here, I always loved this art, like the weird like, illustration of a heart where it almost looks like it's coming off of the page, and all of the bookmarks that look like they're turning into blood or something is like, whoa, and the freaky, like it's got kind of a demon face in the binding. I love this art. This card, by modern standards, is very overcosted, but we did used to play this card back in the day because drawing cards, even if it costs 4 to start and then 4 every time, drawing cards is good. And man, the artwork is so cool. I love that artwork. Juggernaut. Notable for being one of the better, like more efficiently costed creatures from the early days, and it's an artifact. 4 mana for a 5/3. Can't be blocked by walls, which could matter. It attacks each combat if able, but if you're playing an aggressive deck, you probably don't care about that. Good creature to cast Berserk on, to give it trample and do 10 instead of 5. I like Juggernaut. Cormus Bell. All swamps are 1/1 black creatures that are still lands. We've got this same, the living lands phrasing of now they can be enchanted, killed, and so forth. Library of Lang. You have no maximum hand size. There's another one where they came up with the terminology later on. If an effect causes you to discard a card, discard it, but you may put it on top of your library instead of into your graveyard. I remember getting into an argument with someone about what counts as discarding, because they wanted to discard. they were getting milled, and they wanted to put the cards they were milling in on top because it was a discard, but I'm like, no, it's not discarding, it's different. Overly complicated. Living wall. Oh, this artwork is so gross. Some fiendish mage had created a horrifying wall of living flesh patched together from a jumble of still recognizable body parts. Gross. I feel like I had one of these and traded it away. Someone wanted my living wall, and I was like, sure. Like, it's not a bad card and it's not bad art. I just am not super enthused about looking at that. Mana Vault, here's a very powerful card. Mana Vault is a Basalt Monolith that's a better deal for the mana, but has more of a downside where it's going to damage you if you don't untap it, which is cool. It ends up being really, really strong because it's almost like a dark ritual in colorless. And that is strong as heck. Still restricted in vintage. Is that? Oh, it's a game changer in Commander. I guess that's fair. If Sol Ring is legal in Commander. Meekstone. Here's another boring one. Any creature with power greater than 2 may not be untapped. Just punishing people for trying to win, trying to make the game end. Good artwork. Good posing. Gets across the idea. The Moxes. Okay. Taking the top spot in cards that look unassuming but turned out to be the most valuable cards in the set. It's just a forest, but it doesn't have a limit of 1 per turn, so it's way better than a forest. I never had any Moxes. Yeah, so I like how mundane. I especially like Mox Pearl is like so normal looking. Mox Ruby, Mox Sapphire. Okay, Nevinyrral's Disc. Here's an interesting one. Named after Larry Niven in reverse, because the whole way that Magic being connected to lands and is a limited resource, that whole thing comes from Larry Niven books and short stories. And there's a story where there's a disc and it blows everything up. Short version. Read it if you want. It's good. It's worth checking out. As far as my memory of reading it like 20 years ago goes. 20 years ago? 30 years ago? I don't want to think about that. Obsianus Golem. Like the Potato Elemental, I kind of want to like this absolute unit and his 6 horns, ? But he's just not very good. 6 mana for a 4/6 is not that good. Rod of Ruin, very overcosted. Yeah. Sol Ring, there you go, baby. Sol Ring, costs 1, taps for 2. That's crazy talk. And yet, they still print it because it's fun. I agree. It's fun. I think there is definitely an argument to be made that Commander would be a better format without Sol Ring, but it's also, it's fun. I can't say it's not fun. The time when you draw your Sol Ring and you're like, I get to go crazy this game. And being multiplayer means maybe that doesn't mean you win. Maybe that means you're the person who rockets out to a fast start, but then you get ganged up on or something. So, thumbs up is my conclusion on Sol Ring. Soul Net, gain life when a creature dies. Yeah. Sunglasses of Urza, one of the few just like outright joke cards of Alpha. Like, okay, we had glasses of Urza, now we have sunglasses of Urza. The second mention of Urza on a Magic card, and it's on this joke that allows you to spend white mana as red. I have put this card in decks before, but even when I did, I was like, this is mostly a joke. Like, I don't need to spend my white mana on fire breathing that badly. But you get to go, I'm put on my sunglasses. So there's that. The Hive. Man, that is expensive. 5 to cast, 5 to use, and you get a 1/1 flying wasp token. They have to like specify all these rules because tokens aren't part of like the general rules yet. The modern phrasing just says make a 1/1 wasp token. Oh, it's an insect. It's an insect token named wasp. So that's nice. So it counts as an insect. But this has to be like, oh, wasps can't attack during the turn created because they're creatures. Treat wasps like artifact creatures in every way, except that they are removed from the game entirely if they ever leave play, which is how tokens work. So, yeah. The Hive. I like the name. I like the concept. That is so expensive. That should cost less than JMD Tome costs to draw cards. Because usually drawing a card is better than a 1/1 flying creature, I would say. Throne of Bone. Always wondered about the artwork. Like, the guy is either missing an arm or he's like contorted. He's like tied up or something. Funky. Funky, funky. I guess this one, there was always more reason to play, to go like hardcore mono black. Like mono black was always such a, like, I'm playing all the demons and the Lord of the Pits and the dark rituals and all this, and a Throne of Bone too, because why not? But it's not that good. None of them are that good. Time Vault. Yes. It's conceptually very cool. Okay, so enters tapped. Doesn't untap during an untap step. If you would begin your turn while this artifact is tapped, you may skip that turn instead. If you do, untap this artifact. And then you can tap it to take an extra turn after this. Conceptually very cool. Obviously, there's way too many ways to break this. For a long time, they went through contortions of trying to come up with a phrasing for Time Vault where, like, just to be absolutely sure that you skipped a turn first before you got to take an extra one. But I think eventually they just were like, you know what? It's just an old broken card and that's all it's ever going to be. And it's still, yeah, it's restricted in Vintage, so fine. I guess just let it be that. I like how like weirdly interesting these guys are that are like just the people, the keepers of the Time Vault, but like, what are you wearing on your head? You've got lipstick and you're wearing like the abs of a scorpion on your forehead. It's also very funny that they're smashing hourglasses with they're literally smashing hourglasses, taking out the sand and putting it in the Time Vault. That's funny. So yeah, old broken card, really good artwork. I'm gonna come down on the side of this artwork. Frickin' rules. I love this serious looking wizard dude. He's like, I'm gonna smash hourglasses with hammers. Winter Orb, like, man, this illustration. Again, it's so like puzzling, but it kind of works. So as long as the artifact is untapped, players can't untap more than one land during their untap steps. Winter Orb, and there's this bear. And I don't know if the idea is that the bear is frozen in time, but I've always felt like that's like how I've always interpreted is like the bear encounters the Winter Orb and is like it's frozen in this moment because nothing gets to untap or something. I don't know. Winter Orb was all over the place in the old days, and it was so boring to play against. Just slow the game down to a crawl. One of the first games of Magic I ever played there was a Winter Orb. Did I play against a Winter Orb deck, or did I borrow somebody else's Winter Orb deck and play it? I might have been playing the Winter Orb deck. I don't remember. I do not remember. I just remember being like, this game seems really cool, but also, when is this game going to end? Wooden Sphere, gain life for a green spell. Okay, here's the dual lands, which this one of the things that really stands out about these is the border design of these, which they've never done anything like this again, because it's kind of garish. The way they tend to do things now is like if a card is two color, they'll have it be divided in some way down the middle, like between black and red. And in this case, they've made these concentric square concentric squares, which looks weird but kind of cool. And I think all of the old dual lands are kind of like that. Like it's kind of like artwork of a place, you know, and that weird concentric square pattern. Um, One of the dual lands is missing. Is it Underground Sea? We saw Plateau. There's one that's missing from Alpha. Scrubland, Taiga. Whoops. Go back. I like that. Rob Alexander does really good landscapes. Um, like I've said, I'm from Alaska, so I'm familiar with taiga, what that looks like, and it looks like that. So well done there. I think that's probably the best looking out of these. Like, I mean, you know, making art of a scrubland is not the most like thrilling gig for an artist, I have to imagine. But that one looks nice. Tropical island, tundra. No, underground sea is there. So which one was it? Uh, Hold on. Is it the red blue? Volcanic, yeah, Volcanic Island is the one that's missing. Okay. I had to get that straight in my mind. But yeah, these lands, I don't miss this. Like lands, because land cards are so fundamental to the game and kind of boring, but kind of essential. Like you kind of have to care about having good land cards. Um, and it's still today kind of a racket, but nowhere near the way that these guys that cost like $350 at a minimum for a tropical island. There back in the day, there were no good alternatives. Ice Age gave us the damage lands, which were pretty good, but other than that, and those were only there were five of those, and then we got another we got the opposing set of five in Onslaught block somewhere in there. No, Apocalypse, Apocalypse. Anyways, that pretty much covers it. I like how like the modern phrasing on these is that they have no rules text. They just are lands and they have the basic land types. And you don't have to spell that out. That can just go after the word land up here, which is very elegant. There are a lot of cases in Magic where you're like, so why is Island of Whack Whack not an island then? But that's just how it was. And then the basic lands. Um, those sure are basic lands. All right. Well, that was alpha. Was this interesting? Did anybody watch this whole thing? Um, I could talk about Magic design for like hours, so maybe I'll do this again sometime. But I will get back to Soul Blazer because that I think is a lot of fun, and we'll do that soon. So, meow.